Hello Internet, and welcome to a new tutorial. In this new Reinventing the Classics episode, I want to talk about the Ajja lead. Well, I call it the Ajja lead, and it's the first time I heard it. It was in the Tulpa album, the track Sidewinder, Flying Mix. Go check it out. I'm not going to play it just in case YouTube is going to, copyright my video. The lead we're talking about is extremely simple and has the two elements of any great lead, a saw wave and a filter. Basically, saw wave goes through a bandpass filter and there's a sample and hold on that bandpass filter. Maybe Ajja didn't add a sample and hold on the bandpass filter, but for the sake of the example, it's going to be a sample and hold. So today we're going to reinvent this lead and actually push it to a new boundary and give it a modern touch, if that makes sense. So before we dive into this tutorial, if you'd like to support the channel, you can consider becoming one of my patrons or buy my presets on Gumroad, or just leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Things like that helps the channel a lot. Now with that said, let's dive into this tutorial. So here we are in Bitwig. The lead, I'm going to show you how we'll make it. It's extremely simple. I'm going to take a polysynth in here. My default preset of polysynth has my clone of rhythmizer in here already done. So we have a random sequencer right away. I'll take the saw wave one octave lower. And we're going to add a bandpass filter, crank that resonance a little bit. Add a random modulator in here, and this random modulator will modulate the bandpass filter, just like so. And the random modulator will be set to 8th note. So now we have this. What makes the lead more interesting is if we add a sine wave shaping in here. You can play with these shaping algorithms the way you like, but I'll leave it on sine and I'll crank it just a tiny bit. So now we have this. And if I'll add a delay in here, and with the kick and bass, we have this. Pretty basic lead, right on point. Now, let's see how we can actually make it more interesting. So first off, we're going to do it in Serum. So I've already prepared a really simple patch. We have the clone of the rhythmizer in here, saw wave, bandpass filter. In here I use that bandpass 12 filter, crank that resonance, and we have this basically. Nothing too special. Now let's spice it up. So first off, as a viewer of the channel, I think by now you know I like ring mods and I think they're really overrated and I'm pushing everyone to use them. So let's do this. Let's add the second filter in here. Let's add a ring mod. So now we have this. I'm going to modulate it with the second note on random in here because the first one is controlling the cutoff. So now we have this. I want it to modulate unipolar way, okay? So let's set it something like this. So I've just added a little bit of character to the sound with the ring mod, but I want to add more, I want to push the sound to a whole new level. So to do that, I'm going to use the chorus to introduce some sort of a suction kind of effect. Check this out. So with the chorus the way it is, I'm going to open this low pass filter all the way up and let's crank that feedback all the way up. Okay, now we're getting some really weird particles, kind of like a granular effect going on. Let's take this delay down. Now I have this. Nice. The second delay, let's play with it a little bit. Pretty cool. I'll leave the rate the way it is because it's really slow and it just adds movement to the sound. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to introduce the chorus, but from time to time, using some sort of a ramp up shape like this. And I'm going to set the rate to something slow, maybe a bar. So now we have this. Pretty cool, right? Let's add another one in here. And I'll change the curve to something like this. Now I have this. Okay, so now I've created this really simple LFO shape to control the mix, but it's repeating way too much. I want to show you a little trick to actually add movement and like make your sequences more interesting, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do, I'll go to the second LFO in here and I'm going to draw a similar kind of shape. And I'll set the rate to 1 bar 2 and I'll make it modulate the mix, like so. Okay, so now we have two LFOs controlling the mix in here. But we want to control these LFOs in a sequence way. So first LFO will do one cycle and then it'll stop, and then the second LFO will do a cycle of modulation, then it'll stop, and then we'll go back to the first LFO. How we can do that? Extremely simple. We'll control them with the third LFO. The third LFO, I'm going to set it to 2 bars, and I'm going to set it to a basic shape of square, just like so, okay? So now we have an auxiliary source in here that will control how much the LFOs, LFO1 and LFO2, are controlling the chorus width in here. So I'll set it to third LFO, and I'm going to inverse the modulation for the second LFO. So check this out. Now we'll have the first LFO that will modulate, and then the second one. So now I want to make the sound even more interesting. So I will add distortion, and I'll set the distortion to downsample, just like so. And I'm going to play with the drive. One way to do it is to actually create some sort of a sequenced sample and hold modulation with the fourth LFO. So I'll set the grid to 16, just like so, and I'll just create a sample and hold kind of shape. Perfect. So now I have my shape. I'll set it to 2 bars, and I'll make it modulate the drive just a tiny bit. So now we have this. Pretty cool, right? Now what I'm going to do, I'll add a delay in here. I'll set it to 1 1/8 dotted, ping pong, and I'll set its filter to something like that. And the mix something like this. Now I have this. And with the kick and bass, we have this. We can actually make it a little bit more interesting by introducing a note on random on the panning in here. Make it modulate just a tiny bit, so we'll make it go a little bit wild in the stereo field. So now we have this. Okay, pretty cool. Now let's see how we can do it in the grid. So I've already created a simple starting point in the grid. We have saw wave, 1 octave lower, 1 silent key bandpass 8 filter this time, a little bit of distortion, for sure, the clone of rhythmizer in here. So now we have this. Pretty interesting. Now let's spice it up a little bit. So here what I'm going to do, I'll duplicate this filter, and by duplicating the filter and sending actually both of them to a mixer, I'll set the mixer before the distortion. We can actually create a fake formant filter. So what I can do is this second filter in here, I'm going to set it in the opposite of the first filter. So basically it's going to close. So the first one is actually having this opening movement, going from lower frequencies to higher frequencies. And the second one will go actually from higher frequencies to lower frequencies. So now we have this. Okay, pretty interesting. Now let's spice it up a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'll add a flanger. Let's take the flanger plus device in here. You can set the algorithm to the one you like. For me, I'll use the WA or WA1. Set the mix all the way up. I'll take the internal LFO down and I'll actually modulate it manually. I'll crank that feedback a little bit up, and now we have this. I'll give it a little bit more feedback, take a random or basically a dice module in here, and this dice module will modulate the frequency of the flanger. give it some depth, and I'm going to turn on the internal trigger of the dice module. Basically, every time it'll receive a new node from the node grid device in here, it'll just fire a new value. So now I have this. Pretty interesting. I'll take off the stereo width in here, so it'll be in mono. Let's give it a little bit of delay to put it in context. Cool, now we're starting to get something pretty dirty, but I want to push things a little bit further, and I'm going to add some RM modulation. So I'll add an AM RM module, and I'm going to modulate everything with a sine modulator. Why sine? Because I think it sounds best, but you can use whatever you like. So sine modulator, going to the AM in here, let's crank it all the way up. Now check what we have. We can set the sine wave to maybe an octave lower, and I'm going to play a little bit with the fold. So the fold, I'm going to modulate it with this first sample and hold LFO in here, just to make things easier. Crank it just a tiny bit, like so. Pretty cool. I'm going to add an equalizer in here. I'll just take off some of these lower nasty frequencies, so now I have this. Let's take the sine wave a couple of octaves lower. Okay, pretty cool. The thing with the AM/RM module and this sine wave modulator in here is that you can set it to whatever you like and you will change the character that you're having at the end. So I'll leave this for you to, to your taste. Do it the way you like. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to play with the makes just like I did with the Serum example, but in here I'm going to use the steps module and I'll just draw some, I don't know, random steps like this. And I'm going to let it modulate the mix in here, like so. Yeah, I think on 0 octave in here, the sine modulator sounds the best, in my opinion. And with the kick and bass, we have this. So what I'm going to do actually, I'll just take off this dice module in here and I'll add a sample and hold LFO. But why I'm doing this is because I think it's better to just modulate the color or the frequency in here with a sample and glide kind of LFO. So I'll do just like so, and I'll set it to half a note, take off the internal LFO for sure. Now we have this. And the last thing I'm going to do to spice things up, I'm going to add a comb filter. Now, the comb, I'm going to add it right after the ADSR. Why? Because before the ADSR, when the notes will stop playing, the comb will stop playing, basically. And I want it to keep on playing after the notes stops. So I'll set it like so. I'll take off its internal low-pass filter for now. I'll crank its feedback, and I'm going to set the frequency in here to a place where it'll start acting as a slow delay, something like this. But the effect is way too obvious, so I'm going to make it less obvious by adding a blend module at the end. One input is the main input and one input is from the comp, and we can blend between them. So now I can crank that feedback and check this out. And we can actually modulate now the blend with another steps module, but this time let's add more steps, something like 16 maybe. And yeah, just add random values here and there and let it modulate. Yeah, I think it's modulating way too fast, but you get the point out of adding it. So yeah, with this is the end of this tutorial. I really hope you've liked it. I really hope you've learned something new. See you next time.